Since 2005, he has been an active member of the worldwide organization, the Buddha's Light International Association, or BLIA. He attends regular chanting services in Mandarin Chinese, as well as gives lectures and organizes outreach activities to address local community needs, which is a key mission of Master Xingyun's Humanistic Buddhism. Through the BLIA, Dr. Holloway has lectured in countries in Africa, Asia, and Europe, and he has spent a great deal of his time in BLIA temples in New Jersey, New York, and Florida since 2011. We are very excited to have him here and very much look forward to his talk, which is titled Humanistic Buddhism, Origins and Development. We'll have some time for Q&A after, and we'll also end with a prayer.
Thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you, Venerable Miaozang, for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to share my experience and my research with this group. Just get this, here we are. Here we are. So this is the schedule to review. This is all California time. Here. So this is the title, Humanistic Buddhism, Origins and Development. And I'll come back to these two images that you see here in a moment. First of all, excuse me, I want to give you a definition of Buddhism, which is a little bit different than what you might see in other contexts. And that is because this Buddhism that I'm talking about is both how Buddhism is practiced today and how it was developed within China, particularly over the past 1,000 years. And what is consistent about this practice is this engagement with issues of social justice. It's because of that that the term humanistic Buddhism is often used to describe what Buddhism is, generally speaking. What does that mean? How can we understand that today? The most logical place to start with that is to say, Black Lives Matter. The reason is that this is the central issue that we're concerned with in America today, and hopefully also in Europe and the UK and a lot of the world, really. And in America, this is something that is of concern to all Americans, regardless of their ethnic background. And the key is that it's about equality for them. And equality is also a core concern of Buddhism. And it really has been from the beginning. Now, you could spend a lot of time going into specific sutras that describe this equality, but I think the easiest way to explain this is that Buddhists believe that essentially we're already complete as we are. We have everything we need to become enlightened. This is because we all possess Buddha nature, 佛心. And the challenge is to then realize this Buddha nature. That's the challenge. It's not that we need to seek something outside of ourselves. We already have it. We just need to get in touch with it. And all beings have that in equal apportionment. And then when Buddhism comes to China, this equality is given even greater emphasis by a particular monk named Jizang. He's from the Senlun, or Three Treatise school. And he lives from the late Sui into the early Tang Dynasty. And he argues that even inanimate objects have Buddha nature. The idea is that if you start to talk about hierarchies, right? Saying, sentient beings or animate objects are superior to inanimate objects, it's a slippery slope. And the minute you start having these hierarchies, it's all lost. So really from this development of Buddhism early in Chinese history, you can see that equality is a really central concern. And one term that comes to be very important with this is non-discrimination, right? Equality is not dividing things. And they say bu'ar, I mean, not dual, not non-dualistic. And the key with that is that when texts describe non-dualism, the key is to understand that doesn't mean everything is like identical, like clones, but rather it's an egalitarian ideal, that the uniqueness of each person is manifest, but that each person is treated and each being is treated with the same respect and value. And because of this focus on equality in Buddhism, it's important that Buddhists engage with problems of society to make this world a better place. Like I said in the first slide, Black Lives Matter. Now, Foguangshan is a Zen or Chan temple. And what that means is that there's been a long history of engagement, which we are part of. And I'm going to begin with a historical overview of this tradition, and then I will discuss how today this group, Foguangshan, promotes equality. Before I get to what is Buddhist history, what we now, it's important to start with what Buddhism is not. And what it's really not is a hierarchical religion. There is a very short history to this. It starts around the 1890s and into the early 20th century. What it was is that in the build-up to World War II, Japan was marginalizing Buddhism. And in order to survive, certain Buddhists in Japan decided they were going to support the war effort and argue for their connection to this warrior spirit, or Bushido. The truth is the word Bushido was invented in the 1890s. It's not an old word. And that's why you have these. These are two articles you can read for yourself on this topic. One is by Carl Friday. It's in a journal which is geared towards history teachers. So it's very readable and easy to understand. It's called Bushido or Bull. And you can see he's sort of censoring the word after bull, right? He's saying it's not really got any connection with Japanese warrior tradition. It's all this nationalist, mythology that was invented. And the second article is by one of the professors from the University of Pennsylvania, where I got my PhD, G. Cameron Hurst III. He liked to be called Cappy. And here he discusses not only the invention of this term Bushido, but also the invention the Japanese are inherently loyal people. That was part of this myth-making, part of this nationalist mythology. And also this idea that samurai were somehow eager to commit suicide as part of their loyalty to their feudal lords or daimyo. And so the article, really nice. I gave you 3-page numbers. If you're really lazy, you could just look at those 3 pages in the article and see, yes, Japan was not this place where loyalty and hierarchy was dominant. And certainly Buddhism is not about that either. So that's what Buddhism is not part of this. So what is it? Back to that side of the question. This is a very interesting book that came out from Oxford in 2008 by a professor at the University of Iowa. And he describes how Zen became Zen. It's a long and complicated book, but the key is that this religion was deeply influenced by this particular time in Chinese history called the Song Dynasty. And this dynasty was really deeply misunderstood for a very long time. The reasons for that are outside the scope of this lecture, but the key is that during the Song, there was a very important Neo-Confucian scholar called Zhu Xi, and he criticized Buddhism as being disengaged from social problems of the time. He said, Buddhists just are not engaged with this world we live in. And that was his big criticism of them. And people just took Zhu Xi's words as gospel, essentially. Buddhists are not engaged with the world. But Professor Schluter looked more carefully at how Buddhists discussed this topic and saw that actually Buddhist groups particularly the Linji and Caodong schools, the Rinzai and Soto schools of Zen. They criticized each other when they felt that the other group was not engaged enough in the problems of the society of the times. So kind of the big discovery of Professor Schluter's book is that the gold standard by which everyone was measuring themselves in the Song dynasty was based on how socially engaged they were. And so when we talk about humanistic Buddhism today and engaged Buddhism today, the reason for that are very old, and they go back to the Song dynasty. Now, it's not enough to say that during these times social engagement was valued. You have to tell you a little brief something about these times. And the key is that we know an awful lot about the Song dynasty because, well, the printing press was invented then. The movable type printing press is the one people focus on as this incredible invention. But really, it was the woodblock printing was how lots of texts were mass produced. So we have a ton of sources for the Song from 1,000 years ago. We have really a wealth of information. And within this, the key is that recent scholars over the past 25 years or so have understood that the Song was a really progressive time. What does that mean? Particularly, women during the Song had a great deal of freedom. One problem with that is that women who had more wealth had greater freedom than women who had less wealth. But really, the key is that gender was not the biggest deciding factor of a person's agency. Wealth was a bigger deciding factor, and social status, and women could enjoy that. Certain women, particularly elite women. So an elite woman would have much greater legal protection and freedom than a less wealthy man. And this is surprising to us because we are used to thinking that gender is the biggest decider of a person's rights and ability to exert their agency. One way that women were able to protect themselves is they could maintain their property into a marriage. And that's really quite amazing because in Europe and even in the UK, and I think we have a few people participating today from the UK, into the 19th century, women would not have legal rights or be able to maintain control of the property they brought into a marriage. They would lose that. They would cede that property to their husbands in Europe and the UK. But in Song China, women could own property. And also women could sue their husbands for divorce. Dr. Eber's book in the introduction has an example of a woman who is very unhappy with her husband. He's fooling around and drags him by the sleeve and sues for divorce and is given, she not only maintains the control of her property, she maintains custody of her daughter, who she raises because she argues her husband would be a bad influence on her daughter's moral development. So the Song was a very progressive time. Now, this is a map of what the Song looked like. The key is to understand that this place was very connected. This world was not an isolated world. People often think of China as this place with a great wall, and that this great wall, I'll draw it somewhere up here north of Beijing, was the reason China was cut off from the world. Well, that great wall was not around during most of China's history. And in fact, this trade route was really how China was interconnected with the world. Now, within this trade route, there's this one particular place that's extremely important called Dunhuang. I'm sorry, I'm writing in red. It's easier to me. And now I've made it look like it's more of the trade route. But there you go. That place, Dunhuang, is an important source of our understanding of the connection of Buddhism across these trades routes and with the rest of the world. So this is a picture of what Dunhuang looks like. It's an oasis in the desert. And these are caves right here, right? These are caves. And in those caves, there are Buddhist statues and even Buddhist texts that survive till today. This is a very miniaturized text that was hand copied during this time from the Dunhuang corpus. A large number of texts were found in a hidden cave 100 years ago. And this is a hand copied sutra from this one particular text, which I'm going to emphasize later in the talk, called the Vimalakirti. And this Vimalakirti Sutra is one that is very central to this engaged Buddhism, to this humanistic Buddhism, to how Buddhism became this religion that we enjoy today. And it was copied many, many times in this Dunhuang corpus. There was 284 copies of Dunhuang buried, secreted away in this cave. And what you're looking at here is a hand-copied edition of the Vimalakirti Sutra. And this is the chapter, actually, chapter 7 of the sutra. This is chapter 7 here. And I will show you a depiction of that in a few minutes. This particular copy dates from no more recent than the Tang Dynasty. So it's older than 907 in age. And so when we say we have a lot of information on what Buddhism was like 1,000 years ago, this is an example of that. This is Paul Pelliot discovering the Dunhuang manuscripts in 1908. And he's being very careful with his candle here, because these are all the sutras that were secreted away in a secret cave in Dunhuang. And the manuscripts date from 406 to 1000. Amongst them is the oldest printed book in the world, which dates from 868. These are more of the manuscripts. And people would gain good karma by copying these sutras. This is an example of a sutra. And what's fascinating about it is it represents this value of equality in Buddhism. This is the dedication is right here, which is translated. The person copied the sutra and dedicated the good karma to his ox, hoping that this one chapter of the Diamond Sutra, which he copies out, would allow the ox to be reborn in a better life, and that he would no longer have to be reborn as an animal. And this is dated from the year 911. So this value of equality we can see in the sutra, and this is the end dedication, the colophon. He concludes, humbly on behalf of my old plowing ox, that its soul, I should change that, may be reborn in the Pure Land, and that when Maitreya is born on earth as a Buddha, it may participate in his first assembly, while all shall hear the holy law. So this person, we have no idea who he was, but he dedicated the good karma from this copying of the sutra to his ox. And I find this really quite beautiful. Now, moving on specifically to how equality works in the Vimalakirti, the key is that the representations of this particular chapter, chapter 7, which I will tell you about in a moment, they became standardized and they became very popular. And the depictions of this chapter involve a goddess. Now, she's not named in the sutra, but she's just referred to as the goddess. And what she's doing in this moment in this chapter is she's scattering flower petals around Vimalakirti's room. And I'll show you that in a moment. As she's scattering these flowers, it's an inciting incident that causes a debate on gender equality with a monk named Shariputra or Shalifor. See, what happens is, as she's scattering the flowers, actually I'll show you, there she is, scattering the flowers. The flowers do not stick to the robes of the enlightened people, such as this bodhisattva of wisdom. But here's Shariputra, they stick to his garment. And monks are not allowed to adorn their garments. So he gets upset that he is breaking the Vinaya rules. And he criticizes the goddess. And he criticizes her and says that if she's so enlightened, why is she still a woman? And so the goddess uses her magic powers to turn Shariputra into a woman, so he can feel what it is like to be a woman firsthand. And through this experience, he learns that the binary categories of male and female do not relate to one's ability to understand the Dharma, And so this is this scene where this monk is being taught about gender equality that is celebrated and becomes a standard depiction of the sutra. Now, before I explain the rest of the figures in this scene, I want to draw your attention to the dates here. Now, this particular sutra is in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. It's part of their permanent collection, but it's not often on display because it is a silk scroll and it fades when it is exposed to light. But this sutra from the Yuan Dynasty, this is when the Mongols ruled China, was was based on a copy from the Jin Dynasty from a painter named Ma Yunqing. And this Jin Dynasty painting itself was a copy of a Song Dynasty painting by Li Gongning. The point of all of this is to not say that these painters lacked originality, but rather they were so enamored with this particular depiction that it got copied again and again and again. And the point is that not only is this scene incredibly popular, but this depiction of this moment in this entire sutra was what people really loved. And when they were trying to define what is Buddhism, this is what people used to represent Buddhist ideals. So here we have one figure here on the right. This is Vimalakirti. He is a merchant, and he is sitting here on the dais. Secondly, we have the Tianyu, the goddess. Third, we have Shariputra, who is known as the wisest disciple of the Buddha. And finally, we have Manjusri, the bodhisattva of wisdom. He is understood as the wisest of the bodhisattvas. And this is the lion that is his noble steed, goes with him everywhere. Now, the scene is divided in half by this incense burner. And this is significant because on this right half of the scene, these two individuals here are in the position of teaching the Dharma, which is a surprise because you might imagine that the wisest disciple of the Buddha would be the one to teach, or the wisest of the bodhisattvas would be the teacher. But this scene and this sutra is challenging this hierarchical view, which sees monastics as superior to lay people. And people would often also see women as being a marginalized group in the society. And so again, women are positioned here in this scene as teachers of the Dharma, and so is this merchant. And so what you see in this scene is this egalitarian message. And what I'm not sure if you can see them clearly with the video, but there is a lot of flowers that are being scattered throughout the scene also. And that is this standard representation. It really begins in the 6th century of the Common Era and continues on. When people represent this very popular sutra, this is the scene they choose as the focus of their representation. Now, with that progressive message in mind, I want to turn my attention to Buddhist Light International. Now, this organization is known as BLIA, is a United Nations non-government organization. And what that means is that we are sanctioned by the United Nations, and they review what we do on a regular basis to be sure that we are engaged in making this world a better place, working for equality. And I'm going to give you 2 examples of how BLIA works for equality. And before I do that, I want to mention that one of the reasons why this progressive, world of the Vimalakirti and the Song Dynasty makes so much sense in terms of the impact on this place, BLIA, is that what you're looking at, BLIA is based in Taiwan. And Taiwan itself is a very progressive place, arguably the most progressive place in Asia. It's the first place to legalize same-sex marriage. And this is the topic that Master Xing Yun has spoken out in support of. So that's outside the scope of what I want to talk about today in these two specific examples, but it's important background for people who are unfamiliar with the BLIA and the values that we hold. So one particular event, which I think is really beautiful, is that every Christmas Day, Master Xing Yun organizes an interfaith prayer service for tens of thousands of people. And I was really privileged to attend this event last year. This is a picture, so, okay, this one on the left, this is taken from a drone. And they shared the images with me so that I could use them in presentations for my students and for things like this Zoom lecture right now. That day, there were over 70,000 people present. And if you look on the right side here, all these people, it seems like such a very, very long time ago, because notice there's almost no one wearing a mask, right? This is this very much more innocent time of Christmas Day 2019. And what was very special about going there was that of these 70,000 people who were there that day, I walked up and down and I spent the whole day there. I was a little surprised that I didn't see more people that I knew. I was one of maybe only 2 or 3 non-Asian people there that day. So I'm pretty easy to spot, and I do know a lot of people from Foguangshan. But it occurred to me about an hour or two into being there, the reason I didn't see any friends there was because most of these people in this crowd are not Buddhists. They're not members of Foguangshan. They're people who were invited from all over Taiwan to participate in this interfaith prayer service. And I met the nun who went around all of Taiwan and invited people from every single religious institution on the island to come and participate every year. Actually, she invited them once. It was then a standing invitation. It would be impossible to go on an annual basis to every single religious institution there. But this is what the result is that it's this example of embracing the world's religions. So what you're looking at here is a group from the Philippines who has brought a statue of the Virgin Mary, actually 2 statues, each of these, the man in the coat and tails, he's holding a statue, and this woman in this elaborate Filipino costume is also wearing one. And the secret is, the next example of equality I'm going to tell you about, to foreshadow, is about a university that we run in the Philippines for socioeconomically marginalized young people there. They get full tuition, and it's a performing arts school that we run. And so shortly after this picture was taken, they proceeded up. These are stairs actually up this pyramid here under this huge Buddha. And so when I was standing there, these women, they passed close by to me, and they said "Jixiang," which is the way in Foguangshan that we greet each other. It's like a non-denominational, auspicious greetings that we say. And they said that to me and smiled as they walked past me. And so through that, I knew they were connected with Foguangshan. And this is a Catholic priest you see here. So the Catholic Church participates every year in this ecumenical service. This is a Taoist priest and his disciples that he brought from Hong Kong. And so in contrasting Taoism and Catholicism, also there's a wide variety of different ages being represented, right? Young and old, and also different countries, right? Hong Kong, Philippines are present. This is a group, I'm not exactly sure, but I believe they're Aboriginal women, because in Taiwan, there's a lot of Aboriginal, as they say in Canada, First Nation people. And from their dress, it looks like that's who they are here. And they're bringing statues also to be blessed on Christmas Day of last year. And this is the last picture of that I'm going to share, because there's also a lot of young people there. And of all the pictures that I saw, these two seemed really nicely representative, because the fellow on the left has sort of got this very hip goth look with his tattoos and his black shirt and his carefully coiffed hair. And the woman on the right is wearing a t-shirt from her local temple and is more casual, in her attire. But, it was a really beautiful day, because you saw such diversity, in terms of age, in terms of background, and to have everyone come together and pray for world peace in these difficult times was, to my mind, a really beautiful example of the value of social engagement and humanistic Buddhism, and also equality. And, this is the final slide of that. This is a picture of just one of the groups posing before the large, the backside of the end point of the promenade at the Buddha Museum in Kaohsiung. So the next example of humanistic Buddhism, the values of humanistic Buddhism I want to share with you, is this college called Guangming College. And it was established in 2014 by Master Xingyun. And his goal was to empower socioeconomically marginalized people, particularly women in the Philippines. And this is the first ever graduating class from Guangming College. And once the college was established, it was a real challenge to find the people who would be good candidates for these full scholarships. This is from March of last year. We brought a group of these women to New York to share their stories with the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women. And it was an amazing experience for me to be able to learn from the women who were students there and also administrators. So these two women here, the woman on the left is the abbess of the Manila Temple. Her background is quite amazing. She's a petroleum engineer by training and worked for Shell Canada, and now she's leading this temple in Manila. And to her right here, this is Dr. Helen Correa. And finding her was really very important for the success of this project, because when you're trying to empower local women in the Philippines, having a local woman from the Philippines with a PhD who had worked in education her whole life was an incredibly important part of this equation. And so the challenge was that when she was looking to recruit the first class for Guangming College, it was hard to identify people who would be good candidates, because a lot of these women from the remote areas of the Philippines had not had good high school educations. And so they did not do well on standardized tests. And so they were trying to figure out how to find people who would be basically hard workers, good-hearted people, people who would be able to benefit from this opportunity. And so what Dr. Correa came up with was essentially a personality test to measure the EQ of people, and based on that, to have that as a criteria for selecting people who would be receive admission to the college. And in fact, the initial personality test she found was developed in the West, which did not represent the personalities of Filipino people. And then she later found one that was developed in the Philippines, and that's how she was able to find people who would be good candidates. I'm going to draw this line here. You notice this group right at the front here are the men. So the vast majority of the students are women here. And the way how Dr. Correa runs the school is essentially like a really strict Catholic school. The students cannot use their cell phone Monday through Friday. They have to line up, wear uniforms. It's all very strict and regimented. And it was very difficult. The students shared their stories. This is Heidi Amello, talked about what a really tough time it was to become accustomed to this rigid system. But, you know, she felt ultimately it was really important for her personal development. You see, she's wearing a head covering because she's Muslim. And so she herself was very concerned, she said, about coming to a Buddhist university. She was worried that they would attempt to convert her because she's always seen her religious background as something that's under threat, living in a majority Catholic country, the Philippines. But she said she was very happy because no one ever tried to convert her. And in fact, through her experience at the university, she felt closer to her faith of Islam than she had ever been before in her life. So I'm not sure if you can hear the audio or not, but this is music being played. Most of what the women study there is performing arts. They learn dance, they learn singing, they learn acting. But the idea was, if you're trying to change the future of socioeconomically marginalized women, trying to turn them into engineers, just the prerequisite requirements of mathematics would be a very high bar. So instead, the idea was to teach them performing arts. And through this, they could find ways to support themselves after graduation. And so in New York, March of last year, they came and shared their performances as well as their stories. And this is a picture of Heidi graduating with her mom and dad and Venerable Yongguang in the center. So this is how equality works in Foguangshan. This is the history of that. This is why we practice what we do, and this is why Buddhism is the way it is. So I'm going to stop here for now. Thank you. But I just want to share one more thing here. You're looking at a picture of what looks like a traditional Chinese temple, and it is, but this temple happens to be in South Africa. And I took the picture when I visited there in 2017. And I got to lecture. I didn't lecture here because my schedule didn't permit it. I lectured at another location that Foguangshan runs in South Africa. And so when we think about Buddhism, we often think about this thing in Asia, right? This Asian religion. But here we are. We have people here today online from San Diego, majority, some from Texas, some from the UK, some from Canada, people from New Jersey. In fact, this religion is a world religion. And today is as good an example of that as you will ever see. So I'll stop there and I'll take your questions. Thank you. So my understanding, if you want to ask a question, send a chat note to Saiba, and she will take people in order, and I will do my best to respond.
Thank you so much. Such a fascinating talk. It looks like Denny has a question.
Yeah, excuse me, I had to unmute. Yeah, I totally agree with your early analysis in the talk about Buddhism being essentially egalitarian. And in fact, I've read things about why it was so popular and emerged so fast in India as kind of a counterweight to the caste system. But my question is about China, because Confucianism existed before Buddhism was introduced. And Confucianism is very hierarchical, obedience to authority, to the state, to the leaders, to the father, etc. And so my question to you is, how did that go when Buddhism was introduced? Was there resistance in the culture, or was it readily adopted?
Thank you very much for that question, Danny. That's actually the subject of an entire class that I teach. I regularly teach classes on women in Asian history. And the reason I teach that class is I was an adjunct at Rutgers, and this scholar of women's history, Dorothy Coe, had left Rutgers to go to Columbia University. And the chair said, hey, this hasn't been taught in a while. Would you teach this? And I was an adjunct, and I answered, oh, sure, before I really thought about it. And as I then read and read and read in preparation for that semester, I realized that really the big question about Confucianism and women is all about this question of equality. And recent scholarship has argued that Confucianism is much more egalitarian than people believe to be the case. And one reason why Confucianism was seen as something that oppressed women was that Confucianism was equated with Chinese culture writ large. Okay? Chinese culture was seen as predominantly Confucian. Now, that's not true. It was also heavily Buddhist. Okay? And the key was in the late 19th century, particularly from the Wushu Bianfa, so the late 1890s time period, Chinese tradition, again, as a whole, was seen as holding China back, as being not compatible with progress. And so Chinese people started criticizing Chinese culture and trying to look for the source of why China was not progressing. And Confucianism was proposed as one of those sources for why China cannot make progress because of this hierarchical thing, Confucianism. Let me just give you one example from an article my advisor, Paul Golden, wrote on trying to key in on why Confucianism is not hierarchical the way we think it is. The word zhong, zhongxiao de zhong, for people who know Chinese, is usually translated as loyalty. And loyalty as a term is hierarchical and vertical, right? I am loyal to my country, right? I'm a US citizen. I love America. I am loyal to America. But you would never say America is loyal to me. It's vertical from those with less power to those with greater power, right? Person to nation. But the word zhong, that word loyalty, is actually a two-way street in Confucian texts. It's how people with political power are responsible to those without political power, and vice versa. So really this loyalty thing is a two-way street. So it gets seen as this vertical hierarchy, but really it's far more egalitarian than most people understand. So really Confucianism is very compatible with Buddhism, and as is Taoism. They share a lot more than divides them. And that's one of the things that the more you understand about Buddhism and generalize about Chinese culture, it's actually a pretty good place to start, is with Buddhism. So that's a bit of a long answer, but honestly, I teach an entire semester on that question. It's one of my favorites. So thank you for raising that.
Great. We have Marissa next.
Hi, Dr. Holloway. Thank you so much for your lecture. I was part of the time I was watching it with my dad together and like understanding. I was like, he's talking about Song Cao. Can you tell me more? And it was really cool to have his opinion while listening to you. You know, it was really cool. I want a question at the end of your lecture. You talked about a little about Guangming College, which I thought was really awesome. I'm just curious, is there an idea of starting engineering, starting sciences, starting to push some of other aspects into it? Because I understand on one hand, you know, you need the basis of mathematics and law stuff to build up to that, and you can't just jump somebody from zero to engineering. And coming from a former engineer myself, though, I'm kind of curious. Is there a push for, like, say, STEM? You know, like a way to kind of encourage so that there will be less of a difference between, say, genders in the sciences and in the something like that.
Well, issues of women's participation in STEM is hugely important. One of the saddest moments of recent past was when Lawrence Summers, president of Harvard University, said women are incapable of being successful in the sciences. And you say, oh my God, you know, how is this guy president of Harvard University? You know, it's really appalling how ignorant he was of so much of this world. And in terms of a broader college experience, though, Foguangshan, or I should say BLIA, runs 5 universities, and full university curriculums are available at Nanhua Daxue in Taichung, Taiwan, and also at Foguang Daxue in Yilan. Now, I'm a humanities guy, so I'll have to admit ignorance. I don't know specifically if engineering majors are available at either of those schools. I would imagine they are. They are fully accredited, you know, universities with full curriculums. I've lectured at Nanhua University and I visited Foguang University. But I think if there were people that they came across at Guami University, they might be able to go there because it's part of our university system. So that's a half answer, but the best I can do.
Great. We have Ruth next.
Thank you.
Ruth, go ahead.
Okay. Dr. Holloway, thank you for your lecture. I appreciate it. One of the things that I study is the goddess in different societies. And I am wondering if you can suggest a book or some other way that I can find out more information on the Chinese goddesses.
Absolutely. There's 2. One is an amazing book that was just published this year called Becoming Guanyin. And this is a book about women using their own hair to embroider images, sacred images of Guanyin. Guanyin is the Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion. Guanyin is spelled Guanyin. And it's published just this year. If someone could Google for me to confirm, I'm pretty sure the title is called Becoming Guanyin. The author, I don't know. Now that's one book. The second book is also about Guanyin. Yes, it's called, the author's last name is Li, L-I, and the first name is Y-U-H-A-N-G, Yuhang. Becoming Guanyin, Artistic Devotion of Buddhist Women in Late Imperial China. I read an article by her. It was amazing. And I'm looking forward to teaching this book this next year. The other book that's more basic and introductory, but I should also say incredibly thorough, was by my college teacher of Buddhism. The book is called Guanyin, but it's spelled differently. It's Kuanyin. And it's called as the Chinese transformation of Avalokiteshvara. The author of that is Yu Junfang. Junfang is CHUN-FANG, and her last name is Yu, Y-U. Part of why I'm a Buddhist is because I was really lucky in college. My teacher was a teacher of not Japanese Buddhism or, you know, Indian Buddhism, which is much more common. But I was lucky I had a teacher of Chinese Buddhism in college. And so, you know, when I encountered Foguangshan, I said, wow, this is perfect. And so that book was hugely influential, and it talks about this goddess culture in across Chinese history. And it's not just historical; it also covers anthropology, and it's fantastic. Those 2 books, I think you'll have a wealth of resources. Thank you.
Well, perfect. Thank you so much.
Great. Next we have Tracy.
All right. Hi, everyone. Good evening, and hello, Dr. Holloway. Nice to see you again here. So my name is Tracy. So I'm from the UK, the University of Cambridge. I really love your talk. actually, it's really, really fantastic for me because it's quite close to my research interest. So I'm a PhD student in social anthropology, and my research interest is very close to the transnational religious movement. So my focus is on Foguangshan, and my fieldwork site will be in the Philippines. So for me, I'm really interested in your last part of your talk and talking about Guangming College. And I was really surprised by some of your description because, for example, you have mentioned about the very strict rules and the rigid system that used in the Guangming College. So actually for me, because I haven't been to the Guangming College and I just conduct some of the archival studies. So I read a lot of their annual reports, their published works and online videos or online news by Foguangshan. They haven't include such very fruitful description about their strict rules. So I'm really interested in how the students can exercise their agencies and under the structure of the strict rules. For example, how they discover themselves and to strengthen their religious belief, for example, Catholicism or Islamic beliefs under the Buddhist structure. So I'm really interested in that. Thank you.
Sure. Well, this was based on, actually I have an article that I'm ready to send out for review on my experience last year spending a weekend with these women from the Guangming University, the first graduating class. And these are their words, that this is what they shared. And I think what's important to remember is that these are actresses, these are dancers. They have a tremendous amount of energy. And it seems that Dr. Korea decided that in order to channel that energy, you needed to have some rules in order to help them to channel that into their art. And I think that a lot of times this art training is one that, and I think you might want to look at scholarship on that. There's this sort of tension between the rigidity and learning the scales and learning all those sort of details about how you warm up your voice or how you hold a particular instrument. And then once you've attained that, then you can innovate and really share your artistic vision. But there's this sort of tension between the rules, and then once you have the rules, breaking them in your artwork. So I look forward to reading the results of your research. I think the only answer is to go there. I have not been there, but I based mine on my interviews and discussions with the women at our New York temple. So that sounds very exciting. I'm a little worried about time though. Saiba, how are we doing for time?
It's 3:10. I'm not sure.
So I think it's about time for the prayer. I know people have all kinds of schedules, but you're the boss.
We have three more people who are eager to ask you something, so maybe we can finish that.
Let's take all three. Let's take all three together. Then I'll try and answer them together. How's that?
Okay, great. So I think Mads had a follow-up, and then Joe, and then Yunxia.
Yes. Hi. Thank you, Dr. Holloway, for that amazing talk. I'm actually from the Philippines. I'm from the Manila Temple. Thank you for featuring Guangming College. I was one of the volunteers helping with the Guangming College, and just before I came, right now I'm in San Diego helping Sifang Temple. So I'm currently volunteering here, but before I came, I was actually helping Guangming College. And as of the moment, we are only offering like 3 courses just to add on just a little bit more information. We're offering the Buddhist Studies program and 2 underperforming arts, which is majoring in dance and majoring in theater arts. As for the practice, because they are currently being hosted in the temple, we are currently constructing the school building. So it's still under construction, and while they're being hosted in the temple, of course, they have to follow temple rules, following the schedule. So they start the day very early with a morning chanting, a morning prayer to start the day. They are in a very strict discipline, and it's amazing because they came from different backgrounds, different parts of the Philippines, and seeing them, you will see them grow every day. You know, they are kids, they're teenagers, they have a lot of questions, and this is the first time they're exposed with Buddhism, and also having to follow all the rules in the temple. So for someone who's not familiar with the practice, it's quite a lot to take. It's very overwhelming. But they're actually, just like what Dr. Holloway said, Venerable Miaojing and Dr. Correa, they focus more on the characteristics of the candidate student. Rather than the academics, because the academic, you know, we could always educate them and make them better, but when their attitude towards learning in a Buddhist environment is, you know, it's they're not ready, it would be difficult for an individual to cope with the changes, especially the everyday schedule. So that was the toughest part. I think for our students that, you know, they're trying to develop every day, trying to better their understanding of the practice.
Joe, would you like to go next? And then Yunxia?
Okay, Ken, you were not alone around the time last year. Jennifer and I both were there serving volunteer. Actually, we were there for the program called FGS, Foguangshan Workaway Group. It's helping those big backpack youngster and supporting them their food and living, and let them familiar with the Buddhism teaching over there. And a lot of people are from almost, I don't know, but a couple hundred join from all over the world, even including Turkey, like a Muslim country. I have a great experience over there. Around that time, except when you were there for the holiday, we went to pilgrimage trip to India. Both Jennifer and I both. That was the case. Oh, by the way, Nanhua University, they actually do the best, one of the best in Taiwan, and they do have all the subjects, but they are in Jiayi, not in Taichung. Jiayi instead. Okay, that's it. That's what I want to say. Don't have question.
Nisha, go ahead.
Okay. Thanks for the lecture by Dr. Holloway. This is Yunxia from UK. I'm now learning religious studies. I'm a PhD student in Lancaster University. I have a lot of questions, but now I just want to ask one question. I just submitted an article which is about women and gender. So I have a question. I have been in UK for a few years. I have a lot of old women friends. They are very happy to help the community, and they have done a lot of things, donations and organized activities, and especially in the time of the crisis of the public library when it's closing down, they helped to get money to make the it's like to save this
public community, the public space, to make this like a function of the church. So my question is, I have communicated with them. They want to say they are a member of the community, and they have done a lot of things. It's like the church's service, but they don't want to say they are religious. So compared with Fo Guangshan, with Chinese Buddhist monastery and the connection with the local people, in Chinese culture, the old women are very happy to say they are Buddhist, and they are proud to do some work for the monastery. But in the UK, they want to say they are non-religious, but they have done a lot of things looks like religious in my eyes. So sometimes I don't know how to explain this phenomenon. Yeah, that's my question.
So there are two names. One is Prasenjit Dwara, Prasenjit. The last name is Dwara, Duara. And the second one is Rebecca Nedostop, Nedostop. I would start with Rebecca Nedostop. Her book is called Superstitious Regimes, and she talks about how this category of religion gets contested in the Republican era in the early 20th century. And basically, religion gets seen as superstitious at that time. And so everyone wants to stay very far away from this category of religion. That's the invention of this idea that Confucianism is a philosophy and not a religion. So if people are going to come shut down the temple and say, oh, no, we're not even religion. Religion, that's down the street. That's those other guys, you know. And this engagement of Buddhism was also done as a way to show that we are not just religious, we are more than that, we're bigger than that. So there's a lot of scholarship, but Superstitious Regimes by Rebecca Nedostop was published by Harvard around 2010, 2009. There's a fair amount of scholarship on that particular moment, which I think will help you to understand why this category of religion is treated very kind of strangely when it relates to what's such obviously religious activity, and people are shying away from it. So there you go.
Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Maybe we could give Dr. Holloway another round of applause and thank him for his amazing talk.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Dr. Holloway, for such an insightful presentation and sharing.